Okay, welcome to Monday Night Shir, happening Monday night. Today's sponsor is a loyal listener in the outback of Florida, in the bush. And we wish him and his mishpacha tremendous hatzlacha and brocha and parnos and gesund in all areas of their life. Rabbi Yosef Engel enter into his amusement park. Rabbi Yosef Engel, he revealed a style of learning that you can term it as fun and exciting, you're asking an interesting question and then taking you on a journey through Shas and Medrash and all areas of Torah that are so out there. And not only he had learned them and not only he remembered them, but he was able to squeeze out such beautiful proofs and ideas and nuances. And it's exciting, exhilarating as he holds our hand and he takes us on his roller coasters. And you can laugh, you could lose your breath. It's the full experience. Rabbi Yosef Engel's Wonderland. And amongst his Sfarim, he has one, Bas Kol, which is like an encyclopedia. It only went through the first couple letters of the Aleph Beis, but this is no regular encyclopedia. The letter Aleph will discuss many halachic legal terms that begin with the letter Aleph, but he's not just going to tell you what it says in the Gemara and the Pasken about it. Oh, no. He's going to examine a new angle or many new angles and new questions. He's going to flesh out. He's going to take you on a road that maybe no one's been there before. That's right. That's it, a new angle. He always has a new angle. And I think it was just over a year ago, we took a shtickle from his Bas Kol, discussing about how maybe the Torah wasn't just given in 2448, but the giving of the Torah began well before that, already in the times of Avraham Avinu. And that was a wonderful journey he took us on. But tonight is not a repeat. Hello? It's not a repeat. Not yet, anyhow. But in the realm of that discussion, in the discussion of the Avos, Jewish life before the Torah was given, the life of the Abrahamic nation before the Torah was given in 2448. So that era of time, there are many issues to analyze then. Did the Jews have the halachic status of Jews or the halachic status of Goyim? That's one issue of discussion in the past, but that's not tonight's discussion. Tonight's discussion is the following. The Gemara says twice, in Kiddushin and in Yuma, Avraham Avinu kept the entire Torah before it was given. It says about Avraham, Rashi writes in Chumash that Noach learned Torah, Noach studied Torah, and that's how he was aware of which animals are kosher and which not, to bring the 7 or the 2 into the Teva. But it does mean he kept Torah, he studied Torah. But Avraham Avinu was Mekayim, Kol HaTorah Kula Ad Shelo Nitna. That's what the Gemara says. There's a famous letter of the Ramah where he says, was Dafka Avraham, it wasn't Yitzchak or Yaakov. Proof is Yaakov married 2 sisters. Amram married Yocheved, his aunt, his father's sister. So the Ramah says, Bechal Chazal only said it about Avraham, maybe it's only Avraham. But even within Avraham himself, the Rebbe has a number of sikhs discussing the Shvatim, a back and forth about the Shvatim. Tosfos says in the Das Keinim, Mibali HaTosfos in Parshas Vayeshev, he says that, there were many that kept Torah, but there were no rules. You kept what you wanted, and you didn't keep what you didn't want. It's whatever you felt, your gut feeling, like some people feel today. But today we don't have the liberty to do that. Avod Ayhem with the Eibish's servants, and he gave us the mandate. He gave us the doctrine, and God's will is God's will. And the rules, the rules of the game have been given, and the rules must be followed. Whether you like it or not, that's not part of the deal. It's been imposed upon us. And it's a big schus, and of course, sure, it's a big schus, but it's also an achrayus. The Gemara says that mitzvahs lav lehonos nitnu, mitzvahs were not given for pleasure, which means halachically you can perform a mitzvah with an item which is asur bahana. If you're performing the mitzvah with the item, you're getting benefit. The Gemara says no, a mitzvah is not considered benefit. And Rashi says, mitzvahs are not there to make you feel good. Mitzvahs are a yoke, they're a yoke, they're a responsibility that was placed upon us. So that's how it is now. But way back when, in the times of the Shvatim, Tosfos says in Parshas Vayeshev, you could pick and choose. The Torah wasn't given. You want to keep it on your own. You chose. There's a lot of mitzvahs out there. There are many different ideas in the Torah. Some tickle your fancy. Some work better with your lifestyle. Some don't. You can pick and choose. And the shaila is, does that apply to Avraham also? The Gemara says, Kiyam Avraham Avinu, he was Mekayim Kol, the whole Torah. Even Eruvei Tavshilin, which Tosfos, by the way, says Eruvei Tavshilin usually means the Eruv you make when Yom Tov falls out on a Thursday or a Friday and you want to cook for Shabbos. Tosfos says Eruv Tavshilin means the mixing of the foods. It means when Avraham served the Malachim, last week's Parsha, it seems that he served milk and meat. So Avraham made sure he didn't mix them together. Tosfos says that's what it means, Eruv Tavshilin. Eruv can mean mixing, Eruv of Tavshilin. Right, it says Avraham stood above them as they ate. In the Medrash HaGadol it says, why was Avraham standing above them while the Malachim, he was like the Mashkiach. Yes, that's right. Avraham was the Mashkiach. He was standing above them to make sure they wouldn't mix milk and meat. He offered it to them. You want milk, take milk. You want meat, take meat. Don't choose both. That's what the Medrash HaGadol, when it says, V'hu oimed aleim, he stood above them like a hawk, so to speak. He was a Mashkiach upon them to make sure they wouldn't mix the foods. Anyhow, but the Gemara says Avraham kept even Eruv Tavshilin. It's mashmi kept everything. So the $1 million question, why didn't Avraham Avinu give himself a bris before Hashem told him? How did Avraham Avinu marry Hagar, who's an Egyptian princess? She's a mitzvah. The Torah would later forbid a Yid to marry a convert from Mitzrayim. If a convert from Mitzrayim, the gerus takes effect, but they can only marry other outsiders for the first 2 generations. Dor Shlishi, the Eineklach, Yavilehem Bekal Hashem, can marry in. So how did Avraham marry Hagar? So there are a number of things in Avraham's life that are questionable, meaning not that they remain questionable, they're a question, and then we search for an answer. The Medrash says that Avraham Avinu freed Eliezer in this week's Parsha. After Eliezer succeeded in his mission to marry Yitzchak after Rivka, Avraham freed him as like a reward. We've had shiurim on that in the past. And the shaila is, what do you mean? Shmuel says in the Gemara, there's a mitzvah saseh, la'olam behem ta'avodu, hold on to your avodim forever, an Eved Kanani. Eliezer is the Eved Kanani. Right, according to the Medrash Rabbah, he's Canaan himself. It appears from the Medrash Rabbah. And we said there was an old manuscript in Rashi that he was the son of Canaan, but nevertheless, he's from the Canaan family. He's the servant by Avraham. And Avraham frees him? Isn't that an infraction? It's a violation of what later is going to become Asur. Another interesting one is, the Gemara says in the Dodim that Avraham Avinu was a Kohen. Originally, the kahuna was for shame. Well, Malki Tzedek Melech Shalom Hoisi Lechem V'Yoyin. Shame, the king of Yerushalayim, was a kohen, but he was stripped of that kahuna because he first benched Avraham before he benched God, and the kahuna was given over to Avraham. Ata choyin lo'elam al divrasi Malki Tzedek, like it says in Tehillim. Avraham became a kohen due to the words of Malki Tzedek of shame. So Avraham was a kohen, really? So he marries Hagar. According to the Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, the Targum Yonason, he divorces Hagar, Patra. He divorced Hagar with a get in Parshas Vayera. If Hagar is Keturah in this week's Parshas, Avraham is marrying a divorcee? And if he's a kohen, how did he do it? Right? There's lots of interesting questions. How did he marry a geirus? Well, who else is going to? They're all geirus. So there's no choice. But here, how did he marry a grusha? Right? If Hagar and Keturah are the same person, and which is a debate, but going with those opinions, and he divorced Hagar, and he's a kohen, then it doesn't stack up. Rabbi Yosef Engel asks that as well. Not here, it's not on the page we have tonight. Tonight we have a different question. None of the above. The above was just, I don't know, filling in the time, as if the shir isn't long enough. But these are just examples that even within Avraham's own life, yeah, he kept the whole Torah, but the Chayra, you can find many areas where it requires explanation how what he did fits with future halacha. And there's explanations for everything, don't you worry. But for tonight, we have the following issue. The Gemara says in Baba Basra and in Ksuvas, there is a law, in the laws of inheritance of Nachla, that if one has a child, a good child, and he has a second child who is up to no good, the kid's up to no good, so the father feels, I would very much like and desire that all of my possessions should belong to the upright, the straight child. And the other kid will get nothing. So the Gemara says you can't do that. The Shmuel says you can't do it. And the Gemara in Ksuvah says why? Because right now that kid, one of your kids is up to no good, but who knows what kids he's going to have. In other words, you think that child has no hope. You might be right that child itself will never come around, but maybe his kids will. How often do you see that the Zayda was from, the kid went fry, but then the grandchildren are back and even more intense than the Zayda. You never know what's going to be. So that's what the Gemara says. So the Shaila is, in this week's Parsha, Avraham takes everything he owns and he gives it to Yitzchak, as if leaving Yishmael with nothing. How can he do that? That's the question. Who asked the kasha? Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi. Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, the great Sephardic. What? Yishmael was Ben Ha'amah. Ben Ha'amah. L'chera not. L'chera Yishmael wasn't considered an Eved. So Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, in his commentary on Rashi, right? He's known as the Re'im, the Reish Aleph Mem, Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, and he wrote a fantastic commentary on the entire Chumash on Rashi. Somebody once came to the Chassam Sofer. He said, Rebbe, I want to learn one Sefer that will give me knowledge in the whole Torah. The Chassam Sofer says, learn the Mizrahi, because he touches on almost every Rashi, but it's many of the Halacha Rashis. He goes to town, he has long pieces on. He'll give you breadth of discussion, background in everything, the entire Torah, all the mitzvahs, etc. So the Mizrahi, join me number one. This is Rabbi Yosef Engel in his Beis HaOtzer. Ayin Re'im Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi ala Torah Bereshis Parshas Chavdal Shekos Avdal Shana. Yesh l'tmaya. I don't understand. Avraham kiyim kol HaTorah. Avraham Avinu kept the entire Torah, right? Even Eduvei Tavshilin. That's what it says. That's what the Gemara says. Eduvei Tavshilin. The Im Kain Eich Hevir Hanachla. How did he remove all future inheritance from Yishmael and from the children of Keturah? He had many other kids. The Nasan, he gave it all to Yitzchak. Varminah, we say beperek nara in Ksuvas, loy teve be'abudach santa. You shouldn't be, a person shouldn't allow themselves to be the witness of such a transaction taking place. Not only the father shouldn't do it, but people on the street are admonished and forewarned not to be witnesses to such a transaction. It's a shanda. Vafilu mi bora bisha lebra tava. And even from a bad son to a good son. So the father has reason, is justified. The father says, listen, that kid has gone down the wrong path. I'm writing him off. I'm writing him off. Right? Happens all the time. And the father's upset. The kid has broken the pact. He's taken his own path, so let him fend for himself. And yet the Gemara says you shouldn't do it. That's the Shiloh. So what was going on with Avraham? He gave everything. V'ayitein, he gave his kol asher lo, he gave everything he had to Yitzchak. How do you explain that?
What about it says in the end, it says like the end of Parshas,
all the other
he also gave matanos to them.
Yeah, what were the matanos? What does Rashi say? Shem tumah morsel lahem. Things he didn't give to Yitzchak. Okay, so that's the shayla. So comes Rabbi Yosef Engel and he says,
Maybe because Hashem told him, Yitzchak Yikar L'chazara.
so that means Yishmaels not his child?
Yeah, he's like not relevant.
Yikara l'chazara. Yishmaels?
Definitely his child.
Shmuel had a chiyuv for a bris.
The whole thing he went
Right?
through.
And Hashem l'Yishmael shmaticha. Yishmael shmaticha. Hashem answered Avraham's prayers for Yishmael. Lo yisofer meroiv. The Malach said about Yishmael in Parshas Lech Lecha. So, just because Yitzchak is the main son, so doesn't mean Yishmael b'cha. So let's see. There are many ways to explain what happened over here. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, we can get out of this issue completely. The Gemara b'ksuvas sham amar lehedya. The Gemara says there's a reason. There's a reason why. There is a reason why you can't write the possessions away from the child that's going down a wrong path. What's the reason? It says, we shouldn't be in the house of Abu Sand, he shouldn't be present, shouldn't be a witness to the transaction. From a negative son to a good son. Because you don't know what's going to be. Maybe the Oisvarf son's going to have great kids. Ad kan loshen Gemara. The Imkain says, what do you see from here? The whole reason for the din is you don't know what's going to be. All right. So what if someone has Ruach Hakodesh and knows what's going to be? What if someone knows the future? Avraham had a vada, he knew Ruach Hakodesh what's going to be. He knew what's going to be with the Yishmaels Einiklach. He knew exactly what's going to be in the future and what's going to be in 2025. He knew what's going to be. It's not going to be great. The Imkain had a shapir hayamutu lahav v'nachlu mehem. So he says like this, you use Ruach HaKodesh. What's the whole issue with playing this game? Because you don't know what's going to be. What if you do? So based on his Ruach HaKodesh, the issue was a non-issue. So Fakir Rabbi Yosef Engel wants to know, so what's bothering the Mizrahi? What's bothering the Mizrahi? You know what the Mizrahi's problem is? There's a Gemara in Brachas, famous Gemara. Chizkiyahu HaMelech did not have children. And Chizkiyahu was punished with an illness. Yeshaya was supposed to reprimand Chizkiyahu for not having children. But Yeshaya said, I should go to him, let him come to me. The king should go to the prophet, because he has a story with Yehoram. When Yehoram was at war against Moav, Yehoram was searching for Elisha. Yehoram was searching for Elisha. The king has to come to the prophet. So Chizkiah should come to me. I have a message for him. Let him come to me to hear it. And Chizkiah said, Fakert, you know, by Eliyahu and Achav, Eliyahu had a statement to tell Achav, a statement from God. And the Eibusha said, Eliyahu, go to Achav. The Navi goes to the king. So Chizkiah said, the Navi goes to the king. So between all this, no one was going to nobody. It's very similar to the issue by Yiftach and Pinchas. When Yiftach had a neder, right? That when he came back from war against Ammon, whatever he will greet coming out of his home, he will bring as a korban. And his daughter came out. And he had this neder to fulfill. And Pinchas could have absolved him of his oath. Pinchas said, let him come to me. I'm the Navi. I'm the Kohen Gadol. Yiftach's the leader. Let him come to me. Yiftach said, no, I'm like the king. Same battle. So the Eibishter gave Chizkiah a severe illness in order that Yeshaya is going to come visit him because of the mitzvah of visiting the sick. So the Eibishter brought them together. He brought them together. And Yeshaya says, you're going to die because you didn't have children. So Chizkiah said, there's a reason why I didn't have children. I saw what was going to happen. My children are going to be huge Rishoyim. So Yeshaya says, that's none of your business. You have a chiv to have kids. What's going to be is the Eibishter's business. You can't take that into consideration. Now, I think years ago, maybe 4 years ago, we had a shir where we went through a whole mahalach based on Rav Yonis and Eibishitz, that the debate between Yeshaya and Chizkiah was whether Chizkiah was truly a king. He was only a king of two Shvatim, Yehuda and Binyamin, Levi. Maybe to have the halachic status of a melech, it's only if you're melech of Klal Yisrael. Rav Yonis and Eibishitz said this was the debate. Chizkiah thought, I'm just like, now Achav was a king of the 10 Shvatim, so he had the majority. Chizkiah said, I'm the king of two. Good enough. So just like Eliyahu made his way to Achav, so Yeshaya has to make his way to me. And Yeshaya's taken it was no, that you're a king of only two Shvatim. It's a minority of the Jews. You don't have the halachic status of a king. You have to come to me. That was a debate they had. And this also led to debate over here about taking the future into mind. And we explained there's an idea, sometimes you kill somebody based on the future. A ben Seir remarry, you knock him off based on what's going to be. A roidef is nidden al shem seif, you kill him based on what he's going to do. The Medrash Rabbah says when the Shvatim wanted to kill Yosef, it's because they saw that Yosef will have an Einokul Yeravam, will wreak havoc upon the Jews, bring Avodah Zarah into the land, cause the 10 tribes to become lost, etc. So they wanted to knock off Yosef based on the future. And it could be that was Chizkiah's. Chizkiah said that if you can punish based on the future, so if my kid's going to be Menashe, a huge Rasha, so let me not bear him. If you can kill someone based on their future crimes, so Alachas Kam V'Kama, don't allow them to be born based on their future crimes. That was his take. And now, can you just Pasken based on taking the future into mind? The Rogatchover writes that taking the future into mind is no less than an umdana, a regular assumption. You can assume things based on, I don't know, physical data or anything, the patterns that you see. Ruach Hakodesh, knowing what's going to be, is no less than an assumption. A king is allowed to kill based on an assumption. A king is allowed to kill based on an umdana. If a king is allowed to kill based on an umdana, based on an assumption, so he could kill based on Ruach HaKodesh, based on seeing what's going to happen. So that was Chizkiah's taina. But Yeshaya, according to Yonis and Eibish's, Yeshaya says, Chizkiah, you ain't no king. You're only king of two Shvatim. So you don't have the right to, you need real witnesses. You can't pass them based on assumptions. You can't take Ruach HaKodesh into account either. So therefore, it's as if we don't know what's going to be. So you have to have children. That's something we said a couple of years ago. Irrelevant for tonight. No questions. Let's go. Your last question is what we're going to learn. So says Rabbi Yosef Engel that L'cher, you know what was bothering the Mizrahi? We have the story in Barachas Daf Yud that Yeshaya told Chizkiah, Nigzrel, you're going to die because you weren't Isaac and having children. So Amalei, he said back, because I saw Baruch HaKodesh, I'm going to have children. Kids up to no good. So Yeshaya said, Ba'adi kavshid rachmana, the famous expression, Ba'adi kavshid rachmana lamalach. What's going to be in the future is God's business. My demifkadet, what you have a mitzvah to do, you must do. And my what's God's business is God's business, what your business is your business. You have to have children. So says Rabbi Yosef Engel, now I understand the Mizrahi. Just like Yeshaya told Chizkiah, you can't take the future into account. That's not your business. You deal with the present. So how did Avraham Avinu take the future of Yishmael and Yishmael's children into the account? That's the Shaila. Can you just use Ruach HaKodesh? So says Rabbi Yosef Engel, V'ulam, I have two answers to this question. Why Avraham, using his insight to the future, can be used, is relevant, is effective by transferring the possessions from Yishmael to Yitzchak, and it's different in the story of Shai and Chizkiah. Why? Because mitzvahs period dasham, having children is a mitzvah mechuyeves medina. Strict law, one must have children, a boy and a girl. So in a strict law to have a mitzvah, so you can't start using spiritual intuition of the future to shake that off. Masha'enkin, the kiyum atar of Avraham before it was given was midas chassidus. It was only it was almost like an insight of the soul to go beyond the letter of the law and keep mitzvahs. The in came, if it's only midas chassidus to keep halacha, so yesh loimer that if you don't have to do it, it's only voluntary, it's like an intuition of the soul, then if you happen to know, based on Ruach Hakodesh, l'chora, you could use that. The Shapir or Yochel Lismich, he could rely on Ruach Hakodesh that he saw that there wouldn't be any good kids. He says that's something very well understood, makes sense. V'oid yesh l'chalak, another answer, the difference between here and brachas, because by Peru Revu, you will be yoitz of the mitzvah, whether the kids are goody two-shoes, or whether the guy is a mafia boss. Afilu b'bonim lo tovim. So the fact that your kids are going to be negative, almost like therefore what? Menashe is going to be an avid idol worshiper. Therefore what? Do the mitzvah of having children. Fulfill the mitzvah of having kids. It doesn't dismiss the mitzvah. You'll still be yaitz to the mitzvah. Masha'enkin over here, you want to transfer all possessions to the child that's going down the right path. What's the issue with doing that? The Gemara says you shouldn't do it because who knows what's going to be. The whole reason for the takana is who knows what will be. But if you happen to know what will be, there's no reason for the takana. Very simple svara. By proof, what's going to be is irrelevant. Whereas over here, by the Abure Achsanta, by transferring the whole reason you shouldn't do it is because who knows what's going to be. If you happen to know, so there's no reason for the takana, right? A very obvious svar. Mashenke by Achsanta, the reason is because who knows what's going to be. Imkain, if you do know, Shapir Rashoyin Lahavir Hanachla. Ukamuvan. The difference of his two answers is the first answer only applied till the Torah was given. When Avraham Avinu is keeping the Torah, midas chassidus, so it's allowed to take Ruach Hakodesh. Once the whole thing is airy-fairy, then you could take Ruach HaKodesh and you could use that. The whole thing is it's a spiritual endeavor. You don't have to keep the mitzvahs. It's for the sake of your neshama. It's a spiritual journey. So then you could take spiritual knowledge of what's going to be, and it'll affect you. The second answer is even today. This din of Aburich Santa, a din which is all about that you don't know what's going to be, so you have to be cautious, but if you do know what's going to be, it doesn't apply. These are the two answers of Rav Yosef Engel. And this leads us into a fascinating discussion about what's taka the deal with using Ruach HaKodesh to Pasken Halacha. Usually Halacha is concrete. Well, you have Eidim. Now, how often do you have two Eidim? Very rare. One Eid. Also, how often do you have Eidim? So there's a whole set of tools that Rabbanim Bezin have to work with. Chazakas, established assumptions, roiv, statistics, chances, sfeikas, doubts, double doubts, umdinus, assumptions, and umdinus, presumptions, etc., etc. But this is all natural knowledge. It's when the data you have is naturally observed. But what if the data you have is supernaturally observed? A malach comes and tells you something. A magid comes and teaches you. Rabbi Yosef Engel had a magid. The Ramchal, the Baal Shem Tov Ezachia Shileni. So many people throughout the ages. Eliyahu and Navi came to so many people. You have a magid, you have a soul that comes to you and teaches you things. Is the data which is supernaturally received relevant? A Navi comes and wants to start paskening shilos. This is what God told me. The Rambam writes in Chumash, it says, when you have a question, you go to the shofet, you go to the kohen, that's alive. It doesn't say you go to the Navi. God never said go to the prophets. The Chochmah is not by the Nevi'im. Nevi'im are Nevi'im. But, they have Chochmah. But when it comes to halachic shilos, a Navi comes and says, I heard from God. Dreams, chaloimus, is a big one. In the Targum, Yonas and Ben Uzziel in Parshas Noach, he says, Noach was shikri. He gets up and he realizes what his young son, Chum, had done to him. How did Noach know it was Chum? How did Noach know? Whatever Chum did, castration, sodomized him, it was while Noach was shikr. So how did Noach know? The Targum Yonason said Noach saw in a dream. And based on the dream, it was revealed to him, and he acted upon it. He acted upon it, he cursed his son. He acted upon it. So Chaloimus is a big one. So the truth is, this subject is very vast and very large, and we will not exhaust it tonight. However, to get a bit of a taste of all this, join me in number 2. In number 2 is a letter of the Rashba. There is a story that we've discussed many times, famous story in Nach, with Dovid HaMelech was originally married to the daughter of Shaul, to Michal Bas Kol. And then Shaul was upset at Dovid, and Shaul claimed that the marriage between Dovid and Michal was invalid, as the Gemara says in Sanhedrin. Whatever the details are, he felt that the marriage was invalid, and Shaul sets Michal up with somebody else, Palti ben Laish, and she's with him for a long time. Years later, when Avner joins the ranks of Dovid, he brings Michal with him. Michal comes back to Dovid. And the older shaila in the book is, how did that happen? If Dovid divorced her and she married Palti, once you divorce your wife and she marries somebody else, all bets are off. You can never remarry her. Whether she's widowed or divorced, finished. If Dovid did not divorce her, so then she's a married woman living with Palti, an Eishes Ish, who's Mizana. Now she's also to Palti and to Dovid forever. So the Rashba deals with this question in a number of letters. In one letter, the Rashba says that Shaul was a great rabbi, okay? And he and many rabbis with him paskened that the marriage between Dovid and Michal was invalid, because he claimed that Dovid was Mekadesh with a loan, and betrothing with canceling a loan doesn't count. Whatever the details. What's Michal supposed to do? The rabbi said she's good to go. So therefore she's an onus, she's considered an onus. When she lived with Palti, she followed the rabbis. It turns out that Taka, Dovid was married to her, but it was an onus, it was an onus. What do you want? It's like if a married woman is raped. If she's married to a kohen, then God forbid, that's a different story. But regularly, if it's an onus, she goes back to her husband. So it's fine. So everybody, and I mean everyone, asks on the Rashba, hang on a second. A woman's husband travels far away, right? And he's disappeared. Where's he gone? An Eid Echad comes and says, I saw your husband die. She's allowed to rely on the Eid to remarry. Because of Iguna, she's allowed to rely on the one witness. However, should her husband return home, she will suffer the consequences of that decision. It's not considered an onus, and therefore she's considered a married woman that married another man, and she'll be also to both men forever, etc. But what if 2 witnesses said that her husband died? So now the Beis Din gives the full okay to marry another man. And then her husband comes back. How do you judge that case? So it's a machlokes, Rab Shimon Chacham, Masech Yivam, it's a big debate. Listen, the Rambam paskens if a guy comes home and his wife's in one room and sister's in the other, or his friend's wife's in the other room, and they were together, he made a mistake, it's considered shoigig, it's an accident, and the woman can go back to her husband. So, there's room to be lenient if it's a mistake. If a woman followed the psak of Beis Din that was based on 2 witnesses, what else could she have done? She followed the rules. And yet it seems like we're machmir, even on 2 eidim. So they all ask on the Rashba, what's the difference by that woman, by the Aguna, where 2 eidim say her husband died, and then her husband shows up? She becomes usher to her husband, because it's not considered an onus. And over here, by Michal, if it truly is discovered that she was married to Dovid the whole time, who cares Shaul and the Sanhedrin allowed her? What's the difference? So the Noida B'Yehuda in a letter, the Noida B'Yehuda has a fascinating answer. And he says, it depends what was the mistake of Bezdin, what was the Hayrah of Bezdin. If it was an error about facts or about Halacha. By the case of Michal, the question was her marriage to Dovid originally binding? Was the Kiddushin effective or was faulty Kiddushin? So Michal's like, I have no idea, let the rabbis decide. This is not a question about facts, it's a halachic issue. So there you follow Bezdin, there's nothing else you could do. It turns out Bezdin made a mistake, you're an honest. This was accident. You are not to blame at all, there's no ounce of guilt. Go back to your husband, go back to Dovid. But in the case of the Aguna, the Bezdin were paskening a fact that the husband died. It turns out he's alive. Then you don't say that. This is the Chiddush of the Noida B'Yehuda. Very interesting, and there's a lot to talk about that. However, that was just tangential. Because in number 2, I have a different shuv of the Rashba, where he says, you know why Dovid was able to reunite with Michal? V'im toimar. The Gemara said in Sanhedrin that Palti ben Laish put a sword between him and Michal. There was a sword. So they never touched each other. So she was married to Dovid the whole time. That's fine. She was not intimate with with Palti. So the Rashba says, but how would Dovid know about that? If that's the explanation, how did he know? This is Sichas Aris. This is what happens in the beds of a husband and wife. How would anybody else know? Yesh lanu loimer. I'll tell you why. They were prophets. There were prophets in the day of Dovid. Valpi Navi also, based on the prophet he acted. And even though it's not written in the verses, in Sefer Malachim, this is the explanation. It was based on Ruach Hakodesh, based on supernatural data. That's what the Rashba says. If you join me in number 4, this is Rabbi Yosef Engel in his Gulyoynei Ashas, on the Gemara in Sanhedrin where it says, why was Paltiel? It was called Paltiel because God was pilot him. God spared him from sin. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, look in the letters of the Shavus Yankiv. He says the same as the Rashba, that maybe Dovid also knew this Ruach Hakodesh. Now, Rabbi Yosef Engel doesn't make mention here that the Rashba says this. He just quotes it from the Shavus Yankiv. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, so therefore just the Shavus Yankiv, yesh la'ayin, I'm not so sure about this. Imahani b'kamoize Ruach HaKodesh, supernatural data, could be matir and isser? Can you be matir and isser based on supernatural data? Is Avraham going to allow himself to violate rabbinic prohibition based on what he sees in the future about Yishmaels' descendants? Are you allowed to pasken based on supernatural data? You see, by Yeshai and Chizkiah, you could tell Chizkiah the supernatural data is irrelevant because even if there's going to be a bad kid, you still have to have children. And you'll still be yotze to the mitzvah of having children. So the supernatural data is kind of irrelevant unless you go down the path we said before about punishing someone based on the future. But as far as the mitzvah of Pru Revu, it's like, so the guy will be a Rasha. You'll still be yotze of Pru Revu, right? It's almost like the supernatural data, even if you can reckon with it, doesn't have to define your actions now. The guy will be a Rasha, still have children, and you'll be yotze anyhow. But maybe in other cases where the data actually affects your actions, maybe you can't take it into account. Rabbi Yosef Engel says, I'm not sure though. You're saying Dovid was able to know that Palti didn't touch Michal based on Ruach HaKodesh? I'm not so sure about this. He says, I have a better answer. She told Dovid, Michal told Dovid the truth that she was a Nevuah, and is allowed to believe her. Why? Because he didn't warn her. A sight is if her husband warns his wife, and then she violates the warning and she goes into yichud, into seclusion. So we say there's circumstantial evidence that she was intimate. So the Torah says you have to be machmir, consider the suffix like it's certain that she was intimate until she proves it by drinking the special waters. But says Rabbi Yosef Engel, what if there was no warning and a woman stam went in seclusion with another man? You don't ask her based on seclusion. That's a general rule. You do not ask her based on seclusion. Why? So she went inside. What did she do? I don't know. They made pancakes. That's what they did. They made pancakes. She also has a chezkas tara. She has the original state of being mutter to her husband. You're not going to cancel that because she went into seclusion. Who knows what happened? Now, Yosef Engel is saying that this applies even if a woman is living with a man for years, officially as husband and wife, and witnesses have seen her walking into his home who knows how many times. Doesn't matter. We don't know what happened. It's only seclusion. She can still go back to her husband. If you remember, the Ben Ish Chai said that when Esther went into Achashverosh on that fateful night, into Achashverosh's room, V'chasher avadati, right? She said she's becoming Asur to Mordechai. So the Ben Ish Chai asked, but hold on, during the 5 years of Esther's double relationship with Mordechai and Achashverosh, she never touched Achashverosh. The Zohar says, the Arizal says she sent a shade. So 5 years in, when she had to go and besiege, why couldn't she send in the shade? Why would she have to become Asur to Mordechai? And the Ben Ish Chai says that people would have seen her going into Achashverosh's room willingly. She knocked on his door. Sheidim ahin, sheidim aher. That's not what we see. Hein eidei yichud. The witnesses that perceive her going in, it's tantamount to them seeing that she was intimate. So over there we say that. But here the Yosef Engel Tainus that Michal could be years with Palti. No one saw what happened. It's only seclusion. What's the difference? So Rabbi Megber wants to say the Ba'achashver, when the king is summoning you, it's different. It's almost a certainty we know what happens. But if you stop going to regular commoner, you're going to bake pancakes. When the king summons you to the room, you're not baking pancakes. You're not baking pancakes. Maybe that's the difference. But it's interesting that Rabbi Yosef Engel is questioning the Shvus Yankiv, but it's actually the Rashba number 2. What's interesting is this is the Rashba in one place. Elsewhere he gave the other answer I said, that she was following the Bezdin and that's it. So, you see there's already a bit of a discussion over here. Can you use supernatural data to Pasken a Shaila? Now, join me in number 3, a famous Machlekes Rambam Ravid in the laws of Lulav. The Rambam says, Hadas shenektem reishay. You have a Hadas, and the top of the Hadas was broken off. It was clipped off. The Roish was nektem. It's kosher. In Masechta Sukkot, Daf Lamed Beis, there's a Mishnah where it says if the Hadas loses its head, it's possible. 2 daf later, there's another Mishnah which quotes Rab Tarfon, who says if a Hadas loses its head, it's kosher. So most, the big Rishonim, the Rif, the Rambam, the Rosh, right, the 3 pillars that Rabbi Yosef Kara bases his halacha on, all say we followed Rab Tarfon, it's kosher. Comes the Ravid and says they've all got it wrong. Look at the Ravid number 3. It's right left of the Rambam. Kvar hoifia Ruach Hakodesh bebeis medrashenu. Ruach Hakodesh has already appeared in our base medrash. Mikam Oshanim already years ago. Veheilonu, and we came to a conclusion that it's possible, like the first Mishnah Daf Lamed Beis. I Rab Tarfon said it's kosher. Divrei Rab Tarfon who says in Daf Lamed Daled that even if all 3 Hadasim are Ktumim, they're clipped, they're kosher, it's Inyan Acher, which is talking about something else. It's not talking about the head was clipped. It's talking about the Hadas had small branches coming out from its sides. He clipped off all of those protruding branches, those protruding twigs. That's what the Ravid learned, and also the Baal Amor learns that way. Even though the Ravid was a major antagonist, nothing less than antagonist against the Baal Amor, as you see in the end of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. But over here they happen to agree. We once saw what the Ravid writes about the Baal Amor and his father. Oh my gosh, oh wow. And when you see how sharp the Ravid is against the Baal Amor, so when he writes against the Rambam, he's actually quite soft. When he says the Rambam made an error and he mixed things up, it's actually, that's nothing. If the Ravid wants to pull the rug from underneath you, he knows exactly how to do it. Anyhow, but here they punct agree that Rab Tarfon was talking about the twigs that grow on the side. If you pull them off, it's okay. But if the top gets clipped off, it's possible. And says the Ravid, Hakol Bora B'chiborein, I explained it all, U'makim inichlim Hashemayim. This is my special area given to me by God. But he says, Ruach Hakodesh appeared in our base medrash. In Shulchan Aruch, who's the halacha like? The Shulchan Aruch Pasken is like the Rambam and the Rif and the Rosh, right? Rabbi Yosef Karo says, I follow the three pillars. All three say the same thing. The Ramah says you should be choishish to the Ravid, the Baal Amor, that if it's taka clipped on the top, you should get a different hadas if you're able to. So the question is, what's the Ravid doing? He's passing based on Ruach Hakodesh. So join me, jump to the next page for a second. Jump on the next page to number 12. It's the Kapos Timorim. The Kapos Timorim. Rab Moshe Chaviv. He lived in Eretz Yisrael in the end of the 1600s. Passed away young, the age of 42. So he doesn't make it into the book of those that died in their 30s. But he, the Ramon, the Shach, and many others all passed away in their early 40s. But he made his mark. He wrote many Sfarim. He was a Sephardic Rav, but a huge Pasek. And he wrote, for the month of Tishrei, he comes up all the time because he wrote a classic commentary on Masechta Rosh Hashanah called Yom Teruah, and then on Yuma, on Yom Kippur, called Tosefes Yom Kippurim, and then on Masechta Sukkah, the Kapos Timorim. So if you learn during Tishrei or Elul, Gemaras and halachic sugyas of those Masechtas, he's one of the classic commentaries to be studied alongside these Masechtas. And in the Kapos Timorim, number 12, on the Gemara of Nektam Rosh Apostle, join me in number 12 as we read. The Rif and the Rambam dochu Mishnah zu ma'alacha. The first Mishnah said it's possible. The Rif and the Rambam say it's irrelevant because there's a later Mishnah of Tarfon says even if all three are chopped, well, Pasku b'Gemara locha krab Tarfon. The Harayvid in the 8th parak of Lulav Pasak Kistam Masnisin that it's possible. Look there. The Chiluk Harayvid in the Ravid's explanation, he brought in the Sefer Tomim Deim and the Razah in the Sefer Hamoiris to Balamar. Ula Divreya and the Ran holds like them. The Beis Yosef quotes it. Yunsha. Fine. So there's a well-known debate in the Rishonim if the clipped hadas is kosher or not. Fine. But for Isi, I saw Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev. Who is Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev? The Marin Lev, Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev, lives in Saloniki, in Greece, which then was all part of the Ottoman Empire, which opened their doors for the Jews after the expulsion of Spain in 1492. Then the Christians were our foes and the Muslims were actually our friends. Today it's the other way around, mostly. But back then, actually the Mukabalim say that throughout Golus will suffer from the hands of Esav. Right before Mashiach will suffer from the hands of Yishmael. It was already foreseen that it's going to be the way it is today. What?
And the statue Daniel saw, the toes were made of clay.
Right. So, Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev was born in the about 1503 or something, early 1500s in Saloniki, which had a boost of Jewish life, who came from the expulsion of Spain a decade before then. And the Chidah quotes in one of his Sfarim, he heard from Zkanim, from elders, that a Shulchan Aruch had to be written in that time, especially one, I guess, for Sfardim, because all there was at that point, there was basically the Tur, who was Ashkenazi, often following his father, the Rosh. And the Sfardim maybe needed their own set of halachas, and there were three Yosefs, three Sfardim by the name of Yosef that were equal up to the task. The oldest was Rabbi Yosef Taitatsak. He himself was a refugee from Spain. He became a huge Rosh Yeshiva in Saloniki in Greece. The second was Rabbi Yosef Kaira, who actually learned some years in Saloniki. He lived there when he was younger. And the third was Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev. And the Chidah says, I heard from elders Canim, why was Rabbi Yosef Kaira chosen out of the three? He was the most humble. And I've mentioned that maybe there's another aspect to it. Rabbi Yosef Kaira is the only one of the three that received authentic smicha from Rabbi Yaakov Beirav in Eretz Yisrael. So that might also have to do with it. Rabbi Yosef ibn Lev, he lives in Greece, and he was his Sfarim are incredible. He was known as a brilliant mind, Besides for his extensive knowledge, he was very sharp, and he had a strong personality. He butted heads with he didn't shy away from anything, and that can get you in trouble when you're a rabbi. There was another Rav in Saloniki who they had a number of quarrels, and there was a certain individual who had come from Portugal. He had been a Marano in Portugal and made his way to Greece, and he was stirring the pot in the community, and Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev stood up to him, and it backfired big time. Rabbi Yosef Engel had a son that, Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev, the Marin Lev, had a son that was murdered. And they say by thugs that were hired by this Portuguese Jew that the Marin Lev had stood up to. And shortly after, his second son drowned while he was going to mikveh. Both of his sons were killed. At that point, he said, I'm done with Saloniki, and he moved to Constantinople. And he finished his life over there. So he was one of those Rabbonim that stood up for what he believed, but he paid the ultimate price. Very sad. Can you imagine? Very sad. He didn't have the question. If he didn't have the question, we don't have to have the answer. He didn't give up. He just said, I'm going to continue, but not here. This is not the place for me. Very sad. One kid murdered by thugs. The other one happened to drown in mikveh. Nuts. Anyhow, Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev famously is of the opinion that when the Ravid says Ruach Hakodesh appeared in our base medrash, he means literally. It was spiritual intuition, supernatural intuition that gave the Ravid this psak. And it works. V'ra'isi, I look in number 12, says the Kappas tomorrow. So he's also a Sephardi, but he's in the end of the 60s. He's 150 years after the Marin Lev. But I saw in Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev, Shehavin, that the Ruach HaKodesh mamish, it's real Ruach HaKodesh in the Ravid's base medrash. So then the shaila is, so how do people argue on the Ravid? The Afal became, the Ramban disagrees, because loy b'shamayim he. The Ramban felt, I understand the Ravid had a supernatural intuition. That's irrelevant in the world of Halacha. That was the Ramban's take. The Ravid felt it is. Continues the Kappas tomorrow. The Achen Shikas Yadav, after kissing the hands of Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev, I don't really think this is what the Ravid meant. I don't think the Ravid meant he actually had Ruach HaKodesh and that's why he paskens. I think that the Ravid studied the Sugya with his natural mind, his neshama, so his godly mind, right? The Ravid is a godly person, but in his physical state, and the Ravid was so sure that his understanding was correct, it was as if it was revealed to him from heaven. I tell Bochum all the time, if we have an argument of how to learn Taisus, I said, I received this from heaven. Kivan sha'arav lo yapirish. Since it's so sweet, the achiluk and the explanation that he gave between Rav Tarf and the other Mishnah, he said, "B'derech guzma," was an exaggeration. And the proof is that these words of the Ravid are brought in his Sefer Tomim Deim, and over there the Ravid, there's no Ruach HaKodesh. The Ravid explains with proofs and logical explanations. Amar l'musim mikach tainis with claims and kushis. He doesn't say b'shem Ruach HaKodesh. And this that the Ramban was choyluk, it's not because loy b'shamayim he. The Ramban understood the Ravid had good claims to his psak, and the Ramban had responses. Hain mashkotz of Ramban and his Mulchamas Hashem to push away the words of the Razah, which is the Baal Amor, who happens to hold like the Ravid over here. Right? The Baal Amor wrote it on the Rif, and the Ravid often argues with the Baal Amor, so does the Ramban. So the Ramban states his claims very clearly. This was not an issue about supernatural data. This was an issue of how to learn that particular sugya. The Ramban pushes away the Baal Amor Savara, which is the same as the Ravid, with Savaris and Tainus, not because of Loy B'Shamayim. So says the Kappas tomorrow, the Marin Lev, where he went in the deep end over here. To say that the debate of the Ramban and the Ravid could use supernatural data, it's b'chlal not what they were arguing about. Finishes off the Kappas tomorrow. Michal Mokum, the truth of the matter is takazoi. If a Pesach says that the pshat I received it through Ruach Hakodesh, you could argue on him because Torah is not in heaven, and we don't care about a Bas Kol. And we'll see what he's quoting in a moment. So the Kapos Tmorim believes very clearly that Ruach HaKodesh cannot be used to Pasken a Shaila. However, there is a big difference exactly what you're using the Ruach HaKodesh for. Option A is there's a machlokes in Gemara, you don't know who's right. So you Ruach HaKodesh, you have a divine inspiration, tells you who's right. You have a dream, the Rambam's right. That's your dream. Ruach HaKodesh of, or a halacha where the Gemara was unsure, or the Pasken of your day are unsure. There's really a halachic shaila, and you have a Ruach HaKodesh, a spiritual intuition which tells you one way. That's using Ruach HaKodesh to Pasken a shaila. The other thing, the other sugi is using Ruach HaKodesh just to find out information. Was Michal intimate with Palti? We're not trying to use Ruach HaKodesh to figure out a halacha, but to figure out information. In this case of the Kapos Tmorim with the Rambam and the Ravid about the Hadas, there's a shail in Gemara. There's a stir of two Mishnayos. There's a shail of how you learn. There's Rayas Ahin, there's Rayas Aher. So over here, it makes a lot of sense. Ruach HaKodesh has no business here. And even then, the Ma'arin Lev believes that there is. The Ma'arin Lev believes that the Rav Ataki is Ruach HaKodesh. The question is, what if the Ruach HaKodesh is being used to ascertain facts? So here there's room to say that it's different. Go back to the first page just to give you an example of this. In number 9, this is a Gemara in Yuma. Tanya Idach, there's a brisa. Why was Mon called Zera Gad? What does Gad mean? Gad means it was Magi that spoke. It spoke to the Jews. It said, don't eat me, don't eat me. No, it spoke to the Jews. It told Jews information. You see, a woman was married, and then she divorced, and within 3 weeks she's married to another guy. The halacha is she waits 3 months. You know why? Because an issue can happen. All of a sudden, she marries a second guy within a couple weeks. 7 months later, she has a kid. Is it ben Tisha Larishan? Is it 9 months and really the first guy is the father? Ben Shiva Achron? Is it 7 months and it belongs to the second guy? So the Mon would tell us, because when you'd go collect Mon, it doesn't matter how much you picked up and put into your basket. When you came home, there was miraculously an Omer Lugul Goylus, exact amount for each head of the family. So depending, when both of these men brought the Mon into their house, they would be able to see who had that extra portion, and they would know who was the real father of the boy. So the Mon would tell you, the Mon would Pasken a Shaila. This is supernatural data, and you're using it to Pasken a Shaila. But you're not Pasken halachic Shaila, it's kind of really just figuring out information. It's FYI. It's called a Gilui Milsa. It's just discovering. We're not passing a halachic dilemma. It's a physical question. Is it the first guy's son or the second guy's son? And the Gemara says you could use the Mon. Look at the next line. Tanya Rab Yosi Omer, just like a prophet would tell the Jews what's going on in their holes and their cracks. The Navi can tell you everything. So too the Mon could tell you everything. For example, 2 people came to Moshe Rabbeinu for a psak. So Moshe Rabbeinu is presiding over a din Torah. What's the question? One guy says, my Eved. Yankel says that Beryl stole my Eved. And Beryl said, Atom Machartel, he sold him to me. So Moshe said, Labaikir Mishpat, we'll find out in the morning. When you go and collect the Mon, let's see who has the extra Omer. If Omer is in the house of the first master, then Biyadu was never sold, it was stolen. If it's found in the second guy, you know that he sold it to him. So Moshe Pasken the Shaila based on the Mon. If you look in number 10, the Gemara in the end of Makkos, the Gemara says that Ruach HaKodesh appeared in three times. One story was by Yehuda, one story by Shmuel, one story by Shlomo. You know what it says by Shlomo? The famous story of the Melech said, right, the two women fighting over the boy. And the Melech said, give the Yeled, give the living boy to which one? To the mother who said, don't kill the baby, right? V'hamas loitim isu, don't shecht, cut him in half. Right, the cutting in half makes sense because Shnai Meichsim Betalos, two people hold on the talos, Yechleiku, the Mishnah says you split it. So Shlomo said the two women are fighting over the boy, Yechleiku. And one of them said, yeah. And the other one said, no, don't do it. She's the mother. So Frek the Gemara, Mino Yada, how did Shlomo know? Maybe that woman who said don't do it was only trying to create a ruse. She was a facade. She wanted to gain brownie points. She wanted to make it appear that she was full of compassion. Dilma Iarumi Miarma, maybe it was a ploy. Maybe it was a ploy. Says the Gemara, Taka, Shlomo wasn't sure. A Bas Kol came down and said she's the mother. Shlomo Pasken, based on the Bas Kol. You hear that? So you'll say he's not deciding. It's not a halachic question. It's just a practical shaila. It's a mitzias. We're discovering the facts, but this would indicate that discovering the facts can be done through Ruach Hakodesh. To resolve who's right in halacha, the Tanakam or the Tarfin, that you can't. But it seems here that you're allowed to use supernatural data for these types of questions to know the facts, just to know what exactly occurred. The Gemara there in Makir said it also happened by Yehuda. When Yehuda judged Tamar, his daughter-in-law, finds out that he had been with him because she has all of his items, and he said, "Oh, the baby in her stomach is mine." So the Gemara said, "How did he know?" Just like she had played around with him, maybe she had played around with many people. Like that, how did he know it was his child? She could have been Mazana with 100 people. So the Gemara says a Bas Kol came and told him that it was his child. Now what's the halachic issue? Well, the Rebbe has an incredible sikha discussing that story, that she was still bound to Yehuda's son Shelah. But when she was with Yehuda, it was a form of Yibum. From Erev Einon, so she could have done Yibum with Shelah, the remaining child, or she could have done with Yehuda. He's a father-in-law, so the Ramban says before Matan Torah, Yibum could be that way. But if she was with another man, that would be inexcusable. And yet Yehuda relied on the Bas Kol, that it was only him, and therefore what she did can actually be understood as a form of Yibum, a mitzvah, not an Avera. So he paskened that she had done a mitzvah and had not been Mazana, based on the Bas Kol. Now there's kind of different, because he had no proof that she was Mazana with somebody else. He knew he had been with her. It was just maybe she was with somebody else. A Bas Kol came and said, maybe not. In other words, right? Not just that. No, he created the question, maybe she was with another man. There is an idea, Kishem Shazin Simzeh, Zin Simachev. Once a woman she was Mazana with one man, maybe with another, but it's just a maybe. It's just maybe. So it makes sense you could use a Bas Kol to quell your fears. But by Shlomo, there was a real Shiloh who to give it to, and the Bas Kol said that's the mother, so he went with the Bas Kol. But he was using it to determine a physical mitzias, who's the mother. Yet, okay, hold on. Okay, yet we're going to see the Kapos Tmorim. Rav Moshe Chaviv, the Maram Chaviv, he is going to be the outspoken one to say that not only you can't use Ruach Hakodesh to determine a halachic dilemma, you can't even use it to glean any facts, to uncover any facts. You can't use it at all. Just like Rabbi Yosef Engel said, you can't use it to determine that Palti didn't touch Michal. You can't use it for anything. Where did he say that? Not in his Sefer Kapos Tmorim, but in his Sefer Tosefes Yom Kippurim. In 14 and 15. Look what he says in number 14. Go 4 lines into number 14. V'hacha nami here too. It could be when Moshe Rabbeinu would award the Eved based on the Mon, he says it can't be. You can't use supernatural data even to figure out a Metzias, just facts of was the Eved stolen, was the Eved sold. It must be there were already Haychachas and Halachas. Moshe had the din already. He knew if the baby belonged to the first husband or the second, or if the Eved belonged to Reuven or Shimon. And the third case is if a woman got in trouble with her husband. But just in case people questioned, said, Moshe, your evidence isn't foolproof, lahoitzi milibam, in order just to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, just to put the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, Moshe said, and I even have supernatural proof. You even see it in the Mon. But that could not have been the evidence of Moshe's psak. The Kappas Tamarim said you cannot use supernatural data to Pasken, even if you're just trying to figure out the Metzias. That is the Kappas Tamarim's take. So what's this all based on? So, we've jumped to the end of the game. Let's go back a few steps. Join me in number 5. In number 5 on the previous page, there's a Gemara in Baba Metzia, the famous debate of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. And the Chachomim, there was an oven, and the Shaila was about this oven, is it Torah or Tomei? Rabbi Eliezer was lenient. And Rabbi Eliezer said, if the halacha is like me, heaven will prove it. And a Bas Kol came out. We're in number 5, the second line. And the Bas Kol descended from heaven, and it said, why are you guys harassing Rabbi Eliezer? The halacha follows him in all places. Rabbi Yeshua got up on his legs and said, Loi bashamayim hi. Pasuk in Parshas Nitzavim, Torah is not in heaven. Says the Gemara asks, what does it mean, Loi bashamayim hi? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, what he meant was, Kvar nitna Torah, what the Pasuk means is, Torah was already given from Har Sinai. Not like a candle. It's not a candle that the flame is still in heaven, and the Eibush should just lit a fire on earth as well, and then put the candle back in heaven. No, the Torah was removed from heaven. It was removed from heaven. Kvar nitna Torah was given from Har Sinai. It's down here. It's no longer in heaven. And Rabbi Yeshua continues, because it's no longer in heaven, it's down here, we're not mashkiach b'Bas Kol. We don't care what heaven says. It's no longer heaven's property. And you already wrote in the Torah that you gave in Har Sinai, you follow the majority. And since the majority disagreed with Rabbi Eliezer, the halacha will follow them. Rabbi Nosson found Eliyahu. He asked Eliyahu, what was God doing at that time when Rabbi Yeshua said that? Armalei kachayich, God was smiling. The Eibusha smiles. And he said, Nitzchuni, Bana, Nitzchuni, my children, they were victorious over me. I sent down a Bas Kol to prove like Rabbi Eliezer, and they got the better of me, because Taka, Bas Kol is irrelevant. Now, Rabbi Eliezer summoned the Bas Kol, right? Rabbi Eliezer summoned this Bas Kol, which means Rabbi Eliezer believes a Bas Kol is relevant. Rabbi Eliezer himself believes a Bas Kol is relevant. But the other Chachomim believe it's not.
This can't be the Kappas Tamarim's diet, because here you're fighting with the call.
Okay, hold on. Here's the issue. The Gemara in Eruvin says that Rabbi Abba said that for 3 years, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were fighting at each other's necks until a Bas Kol came down from heaven. Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel. It's not on the page. It says there that a Bas Kol descended from heaven and said, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Elu v'Elu are the Divrei Elokim Chaim, the words of the living God. However, Halacha ke Beis Hillel. So that's a Bas Kol. Okay? So right off the bat, you probably want to know why, when it comes to the Gemara number 5, we dismissed that Bas Kol. Rabbi Yeshua got up and said, Bas Kol are in, Bas Kol are here, it's not in heaven. And yet when it comes to Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, we do accept the Bas Kol, the halacha ke Beis Hillel. So hold on. Okay, hold on. So join me for a moment in number 7, okay? Actually, join me in number 6 first. Okay. To Gemara and Brachas, Daf Nun Pes. The Gemara is talking about when you make Kiddush, do you first make Ber Pri Agofen and then the Bracha on Kiddush? like we do, like Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says you flip it. First you make the bracha of Mekadesh HaShabbos, and then you say Ber Pri Hagafen and you drink. So the Brisa says Halacha Kedivrei Beis Hillel. Look at number 6. Brachas Daf Nun Beis, Nalef Nun Beis. Frekt the Gemara Pshita. The Brisa has to say the law follows Beis Hillel. Hanafka Bas Kol. There's a Bas Kol. It said the Bas Kol said the law follows Beis Shammai. I'm sorry, the law follows Beis Hillel. So I wasn't there by the Bas Kol, so I mix it up. But the Bas Kol said Allah Beis Hillel. So says the Gemara 2 answers. One answer is this Brisa was written before the Bas Kol. This Brisa was written during the 3 years that they fought. And that's why the Brisa had those words. It was written before the Bas Kol. The another answer is Taka after the Bas Kol. But Rabbi Yeshua, you see the first words of Tosfos are also the last words of that Gemara. Beautiful pattern. Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua says, Ein mashkichin b'Bas Kol. It's Rabbi Yeshua. That Brisa is Rabbi Yeshua who says we don't care about the Bas Kol. So according to him, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, who knows what you do? So the Brisa had to say, by the law of Kiddush, we follow Beis Hillel. The issue with this is that this doesn't add up. Something doesn't add up over here. According to this, what we have is, in number 5, we have Rabbi Eliezer who assumes a Bas Kol can work. But the Chachamim ignored him, and Halacha was like the Chachamim, like Rabbi Yeshua. The Torah is not in heaven, you can't have Bas Kol. Okay? Over here we say that Rabbi Yeshua does not accept the Bas Kol that Halacha follows Beis Hillel. Right? But we do. So the question is going to be on the we. The we, or in the words of Tosfos, the Hilchos is going to be inconsistent. The im timer, im ken kasha Hilchos al number 6 in Tosfos, the 4th line. The we, meaning the Hilchos, the bottom line, the establishment. The establishment is going to be up the creek without a paddle. Because Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer are consistent. Rabbi Eliezer says you always take a Bas Kol, and Rabbi Yeshua said no. But you see, Rabbi Yeshua didn't only dispute Rabbi Eliezer's Bas Kol in number 5, but the Gemara says in number 6 he also disputes the Bas Kol about Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai. So where do we come in the picture? Because we agreed to Rabbi Yeshua in number 5 about the oven. We're not going to follow Rabbi Eliezer, but we do hold like Beis Hillel against Beis Shammai. So what's going on? Dahahid Rabbi Yeshua, when it comes to the oven over there, the snake oven, we hold like Rabbi Yeshua. We ignore Rabbi Eliezer. The Bas Kol, who Bas Kol, what Bas Kol? On the other hand, we do hold like Beis Hillel against Beis Shammai. We do follow that Bas Kol. What's going on? So v'yesh loymar, that the way we look at it is 2 different Bas Kols. The Dafka Hossam over there, we say Ei mashkichin b'Bas Kol by Rabbi Eliezer. Because the Bas Kol was against the majority. The majority of Tanoim were against Rabbi Eliezer. You're going to follow a Bas Kol, data from heaven, against majority, but the Torah says you follow majority. The buck stops there. When the Bas Kol is against the Torah, you can't accept it. Avo Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, it's the other way around. Beis Hillel were the majority. Beis Shammai, though, were sharper. So there was a Shaila who to go like. The Bas Kol came and said, follow Beis Hillel. So there it makes sense. Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, there was a svara both ways. Beis Hillel's majority, quantity. Beis Shammai's quality. The Bas Kol said, you follow the rabbin. Got it. Makes sense. But with Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, the Bas Kol was going against the majority. And the Torah says in Parshas Mishpatim, you follow the majority. Then we can't have the Bas Kol. So the establishment makes sense. The issue here is though, now Tosfos, hang on a second. So Rabbi Yeshua in number 5 dismissed the Bas Kol. But we also dismissed the Bas Kol. So maybe Rabbi Yeshua is the same as us. Just because you argued in Rabbi Eliezer, that's because it was against the majority. But Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, maybe he would accept the Bas Kol. So how does the Gemara say in number 6 that Rabbi Yeshua dismisses all Bas Kols? He should be the same as the establishment. We only know what he holds based on the story number 5 with Rabbi Eliezer. And we're with him on that. So why is it by Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, we depart and say, no, he's going to be more extreme? We have no proof for that. So Tosfos says, even though we bring Rabbi Yeshua here, Even though it's not the same, because the Bas Kol he was against the majority. But this Brisa takes Rabbi Yeshua to the next level. The Brisa in Brachas, who doesn't believe that the halacha follows Beis Hillel, took Rabbi Yeshua's own idea to the next level, that we listen to no Bas Kol at all. Okay? That's what Tosfos says over there. So there's three levels. Rabbi Eliezer always follows Bas Kol. There's some Tana who goes all the way to the extreme, that you never do. And then there's the establishment, which it sounds from here, Rabbi Yeshua is part of that establishment himself. The Tana in Brachas took Rabbi Yeshua further. Yeshua himself, though, would divide. However, look, there's a Gemara, number 7, a Gemara in Erevin. Join me in the Gemara in Erevin, number 7. The Gemara says a beautiful Bryce. La'olam halacha kebeis Hillel. The halacha follows Beis Hillel. But if you want to do Beis Shammai, you can do that too. Kedivrei Beis Hillel, you could do that too. So the Bryce, the first says halacha kebeis Hillel, and then it said it's a free for all. You could do what you want. Continues the Bryce. What if you want to take the leniencies of Beis Shammai and of Beis Hillel? Then you're a Russia. What if you want to take the chumras of both? I take the chumras of every opinion there is. Then you're just a fool. Hachsil b'chosheach cholich. The fool goes in darkness. Rather, you either follow Beis Shammai with their leniencies and their chumras, or Beis Hillel all the way. That's what the Brisa says. So the Gemara says the first line of this Brisa is a contradiction. Ha gufa kasha. First you told me that halacha follows Beis Hillel, and then you tell me it's a free for all. You want to go like Beis Shammai, do Beis Shammai. Says the Gemara, loy kasha is not a kasha. One answer is kan koidem Bas Kol, kan la'achar Bas Kol. The statement that you could do whatever you want was before the Bas Kol. The statement of the halacha kebeis Hillel was after the Bas Kol. V'iboy same, another answer. Both statements are after the Bas Kol. The statement that says you do what you want is Rabbi Yeshua. Same idea as the Gemara in number 6, that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't care about Bas Kol at all. So Tosfos in number 8 says similar to what he says in number 6, but a few different details. The imtoim kasha. You're telling me that we accept the Bas Kol to follow Beis Hillel, but why don't we hold the Bas Kol by Rabbi Eliezer and Bab Metzia? So V'yesh Shloimeh says Tosfos, you know why? By Rabbi Eliezer was a faulty Bas Kol. You know why? Because he asked for it. He summoned it. And the Bas Kol descended just for the honor of Rabbi Eliezer. The Halacha only came for his honor. Then and only then is a Bas Kol irrelevant. According to the first answer of Tosfos, usually a Bas Kol is relevant to halacha. Not just to find out the facts, to work out halacha itself. Work out who's right. But Rabbi Eliezer was a faulty Bas Kol. So this is a very liberal answer of Tosfos, that in any other case, where it's a legitimate Bas Kol, it wasn't summoned, it came on its own, it can tell you what to do, for sure. That's Tosfos' first thing. Va'oid, then he gives the other answer. Nah, there was faulty because it was against the majority. And the Torah says you follow majority. But here, Faket, Beis Hillel was the Rav. Fine.
I think it's also when the Bas Kol is coming in time. If the Bas Kol is coming in middle of the hearing, in middle of the trial, middle of the court case, you don't use the Bas Kol. The Bas Kol it's coming to teach you which court to go to, which court is believable, which court is right. Not in a specific instance, but in a general sense, like go to listen to Beis Hillel, then you can listen to the Bas Kol. Because it's not getting involved in the details and the chakidas and the drishas and whatever the Beis Din does. It's not. That's something that has to be, the Beis Din down here has to do it. That's specifically what it says a Beis Din here has to do. But to tell you which Beis Din is the reliable one, that it's okay.
I hear. Okay, it's interesting. Yeah. Yep. Okay. That's Tosfos finishes up asking the same shaila that the Im Toimer, though, just like the establishment explains that we follow the Bas Kol by Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai, but not the one with Rabbi Eliezer. So why do we always say that Rabbi Yeshua is so extreme? Maybe he's also the establishment. The same question. Imke Maika Omer Rabbi Yeshua, who holds of no Bas Kol at all. It's not true. Rabbi Yeshua only had an issue with Rabbi Eliezer Bas Kol. Maybe he is the same as the establishment that any other Bas Kol he accepts. And he accepts the Beis Hillel Bas Kol. Says Tosfos, no. When Rabbi Yeshua said the words loy bashamayim, it's mashma, it's not in heaven at all. Ein lashkiach b'shum Bas Kol at all. What's Taisa saying here? Rabbi Yeshua's own personal opinion is an extreme. In Brachas, he didn't say that. In Brachas, he said the Tan of that Brisa was the extremist. And just borrowed Rabbi Yeshua's idea. Here tells Rabbi Yeshua himself. What's the issue? Tell you the issue is, because we're going to follow Rabbi Yeshua. It's Rabbi Yeshua's personal shitta. We're probably going to follow it. And according to Taisus and Eidavin, in number 8, Rabbi Yeshua himself holds no Bas Kol at all. However, it's still in the realm of figuring out what the halacha is, not what facts were, not finding out the mitzias. So, ultimately what we have is like this. Rabbi Eliezer believes that Bas Kol is always Negeah. Rabbi Eliezer comes from Beis Shammai. Rabbi Eliezer was called Shamuti. The Gemara says he shouldn't pasken like the Tana Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Kiva's teacher, because he was Shamuti. What does Shamuti mean? Rashi Tosfos discuss different interpretations. One is, Shamuti means Cherem. He died in Cherem. Because of this story in Bab Metzia, Rabbi Eliezer wouldn't back down. They put him in Cherem. He died in Cherem. Very, very sad. He was thrown out. Rabbi Eliezer was thrown out of the yeshiva in Yavne. What? Yes, Rabbi Eliezer Hukas. Yeah. He couldn't come to the yeshiva in Yavne. He was at home in Lud. Even Rabbi Kiva would come to learn from him. The Talmidim would stay Daled Amos away. Very sad. The Yishalmi says Rabbi Eliezer was once walking down the street and a woman was throwing out her garbage from the roof and all landed on him. He said, it must be today the Cherem, or soon the Cherem will be uplifted, because it says, Ma'ashpois yodim evyin. The Eibusha lifts up the destitute from the garbage. But it didn't happen. The Cherem was never lifted. He died in the Cherem. That's one reason not to pasken like him. The other reason, the Rishonim say, is because he was from Beis Shammai. And the Halacha follows Beis Shammai. I'm sorry, the Halacha does not follow Beis Shammai. He was Shamuti. Shammai believes that the heaven was created before the earth. Not like Beis Hillel, who says earth was created first. Gemara Chagiga, Machlokes Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Shammai believes heaven was created before earth. The Ikar is heaven. Heaven is God's seat, and the earth is God's footstool. The Ikar is heaven. So it makes sense why Rabbi Eliezer would say you always follow a Bas Kol. But Rabbi Yeshua is from Beis Hillel, who believe earth was created first. Earth is like the house, and the heavens like the attic. The Ikar is the earth. So what happens in heaven is irrelevant. That's why they debate if you follow Bas Kol or not. The shaila is, how extreme was Rabbi Yeshua? According to Tosfos in number 6, Rabbi Yeshua is the establishment. He accepts the Bas Kol by Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai. Well, he's also Beis Hillel, he likes it. No, because there it's not against halacha.
How ironic is it that the Bas Kol establishes... Punkt that Bas Kol. There was a separate Tana who went more extreme to say no Bas Kol at all. Tosfos number 8 says Rabbi Yeshua was that extreme Tana. But either way, so there's a big debate over here. What's Tosfos' personal take? I don't know. Tosfos' first thing he says in number 8 is that it's only when it's a faulty Bas Kol being summoned for the honor of an individual you don't follow it. But anywhere else you could. That's what very liberal. If Rabbi Yeshua though is the extremist and we follow him, no Bas Kol at all. But this is still all talking when you're trying to figure out what the halacha should be, not when you're figuring out a mitzias. So when it comes to figuring out a mitzias, now hold on. Even concerning who the halacha is like, the Ravid says Ruach Hakodesh appeared in our base medrash, and that helped me pasken that the Hadass is going to be apostle. And the Ma'arin Lev believed the Ravid used real Ruach HaKodesh. The Kappas Tzmorim said, no, you can't do that. So the Ravid didn't really mean that. He just meant he was so certain. The Chida, in the Birkei Yosef, in the laws of Hadassim, he quotes the Kappas Tzmorim, and the Chida says the Kappas Tzmorim's pshat in the Ravid is incorrect. Because Reb Chaim Vital and the Maharchash, Reb Chaim Shapsi,
one of the big Sephardic Pasken in the end of the 1500s. Both of them and the Marin Lev learned the Ravid meant actual Ruach Hakodesh. And this was to Pasken a Shaila. How does that work? Well, Toysa said in number 8, as long as it's not a faulty Bas Kol, it wasn't brought for his cover, there was a real revelation from heaven, it could be used. So that's first of all. So you have the Ravid as precedent for that. The question is, what about using Ruach HaKodesh to figure out facts? So the Kappas Tmorim also has an issue with that. Like we saw in number 14, Moshe could not use the mon to figure out who is the owner of the Eved or the child, even though you're just trying to reveal a piece of information. Can't do that. He also says in number 15, look what the Kappas Tmorim says. When he says you have to explain the Gemara in Makkos that 3 times Ruach HaKodesh appeared in Beis Medrash of Shem and Shmuel of Shloimeh. He says you have to say the Bas Kol cannot have been what Shloimeh bases Psak on, even though it's only a matter of Metzias to figure out who's Taka the mother, because the Kappas Tmorim does not allow you to bring Ruach HaKodesh into the game at all. It must be that Shloimeh already knew. Right? And Yehuda knew was his child. People could murmur. It needed just a little bit of bolster. You needed some cream on the cake. So, in order people shouldn't murmur about the din, so a Bas Kol came. But Ikar Adin was not al pi Bas Kol, because you can't use a Bas Kol. So, Ma'aram Chaviv, the Moshe Chaviv, is very clear in his opinion. The Chida, in his Sefer Birkei Yosef on the laws of Tefillin, it's talking about the Gemara in Shabbos discusses if you could write tefillin on the skin of a fish. Is it considered parchment, or is it considered just flesh? And the Gemara says, when Eliyahu comes, he'll tell us, he'll reveal it to us. So, on discussion, that's why it comes up in the laws of tefillin. The Chidah has a long piece in his Birkei Yosef, Siman Lamed Beis. And the thrust of his argument is, he says, when it comes to passing based on Ruach HaKodesh, I hear, you want to figure out what the halacha should be in a specific scenario, which Ameret to pass, which Rishon, because of Ruach HaKodesh, that I hear that it can't enter. I hear that argument, even though we saw the Ravid disagrees on that too. But he says to figure out facts based on Ruach HaKodesh, he says, I know the Kappas Tmorim is against. He says, I'm not. I think the Kappas Tmorim is incorrect. And he brings a whole host of rayas. Why revealing supernaturally to reveal a Metzias is okay. Look at one of his proofs in number 13. The Gemara in the beginning of Megillah speaks about there's letters in the Aleph Beis that have a few ways of being written. A mem, there's an open mem and a closed mem, right? There's a nun, there's a lange nun. There's man sapach, the 5 letters. And the Gemara says that later Nevi'im actually brought these into the Aleph Beis. So the Gemara says, can't be. A Navi can't come and start creating new things. So the Gemara says, number 13, you're right. Mi avu hava. All these letters exist. But no one knew which nun is in the middle of the word, which nun is at the end. Which mem is in the middle. Maybe the shlosh mem is in the middle and the regular mem is at the end of the word. And the Nevi'im came and were masakin, that the psuchin, the open ones in the middle, and the stumin are at the end. So if they're more soif, still, Hashem says to Moshe, these are the mitzvahs. A Navi cannot come later and create things. Says Gemara, no. They knew it at one point, but then it was forgotten, and the Nevi'im brought them back. So says the Chidah, what's pshat in the Gemara? The Gemara initially thought that these Nevi'im were creating new information, creating halacha based on divine inspiration. You can't do that. The Gemara's conclusion is no. It was originally known at one point. Then it was forgotten. So what are these Nevi'im doing? They're not creating halacha. They're just revealing a fact. They're saying that you should know 600 years ago, this is how it was. FYI. So the Chidah, you see from here, a Navi, supernatural knowledge and information can be used to reveal Metzias, a fact, a Gilui Milsa. And he quotes the letter of the Rashba we began our discussion with Michal. And we said the Shvus Yankov holds the same way. That when it comes to revealing Mitziasin, it's okay. There is a statement of the Mishnah Lamelech. The Mishnah Lamelech, the great Gaon, the Mishnah Lamelech, in the Laws of Ishus, it's a one line. He's talking about Eliyahu Navi coming to solve halachas. He says Eliyahu can come to reveal Mitzias, facts. He can't come to solve halachic questions. Hold on. In other words, Eliyahu as a supernatural entity and being, he can reveal to us facts, but he can reveal to us about a halachic dilemma, who's light. He can't solve a halachic equation. So that's what the Mishnah Lamelech writes. The works of when the Mishnah Lamelech died in 1727 in Turkey, Rabbi Yehuda Dozinus, he left many manuscripts, and apparently during Shiva his house was ransacked. Rabbi Yaakov Kulei, who wrote the Ma'am Lawyers, was his student. He went into the house, he found all of these manuscripts everywhere. He made a project to go through all of the works of his Rebbe and make a Seder out of it. So he took many of his Rebbe's Pulpulim that he wrote, and he put together the Mishnah Lamelech on the Rambam. It wasn't written on the Rambam, but the student was able to put it all together and put it as a almost running commentary on the Rambam. Throughout the Mishnah Lamelech, you have brackets, which the brackets begin Aleph Hey, Omar Hamagia, said the editor. That's always the Ma'am Lawyers writing his Chidushim. And here you actually see what a scholar he was, because in his Sefer Ma'am Lawyers, that's more stories, simple halach, interesting things. But here you see that he was a major Talmudist. The Ma'am Lawyers was a grandson of the Kappas Tmorim, of the Maram Chaviv. It was his mother's father. So it's interesting that after the Mishnah Melech writes this one-liner, Eliyahu Navi can reveal facts but can't solve halachic issues. So there's a brackets. Omar Amagia. He doesn't say Maizeda, but he says the Maram Chaviv writes in his Sefer, and he quotes number 14 and 15, that even when it comes to revealing facts, you can use supernatural information. So you see that he's marshalling his grandfather into this. But the Chidah is very clear. He disagrees with Maram Chaviv. He says no. Revealing information, FYI, is fine. That's what happened by the Mon. And even by Shlomo, Bas Kol was just FYI. It wasn't solving a halachic issue, it was a practical issue. And that's the Rajba by Michal, etc. And the Chidah says that's pshat with the Nevi'im in number 3. They were revealing what was once known. So in number 16, we have the Chastei Dovid from Reb Dovid Pardo. He was in the 1700s. He wrote the Maskil Dovid on Rashi. A great commentary on the entire Rashi and Chumash, and the Rebbe quotes him all the time. The Maskil Dovid, but he wrote many other Sfarim. His Sefer Chastei Dovid is on the Tosefta, a wondrous work. And in number 16, he says beautifully. He says this distinction very clearly. He says, do you know when you could rely on a prophet? When the Navi is not coming except to reveal Milsa de Metamra, to reveal undisclosed information about an Isser. In such a case, you don't need 2 witnesses. B'chlal, 1 witness could be believed to say that this meat is kosher. When you need 2 witnesses, it's a different story. If 1 witness suffices, you know what that means? All you need is clarification, verification. Ruach Hakodesh can verify facts. An Eid Echad who happens to know the Metzias because he happened to see with his fleshika eigen, is not better than a prophet who knows the truth because he saw with his prophetic eye. That's the expression he says. That the physical eye of 1 witness is no better than the prophetic eye of a prophet. Both of them equally are aware of the facts. And if you can rely on the 1 witness, you can rely on the prophecy. And in Achinami, let's say something osir fell into something kosher, right? And you don't know if there was 60 times the amount. It's not a halachic shaila. What's the halacha in such a case? The shaila is there 60? B'meila, what's the halacha? But it's a practical question. And he says, if Eliyahu and Navi would come and look at it and say, I can see with my x-ray vision, with supernatural koiches, that this is kosher, eat and enjoy. Because by Isurin, you don't need real testimony. It just needs to be on Gilui Milsa, just to reveal what it is. So if anyone sees, who cares how you see? And that's how the Nevi'im were able to locate the mokum of the Mizbeach through prophecy. Because they weren't creating a halacha, they were just revealing. Right? Chag Zechariah Malachi came at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash to locate the place of the Mizbeach. Now halachas can come out of this. For example, when you figure out if the boy belonged to the first husband or to the second husband, there's halachas that come out of that. Who's his siblings, etc., etc. And the Nevi'im come and say they know his Ben Tes Larishan, we accept it from them. In the future, halachas could come out, Yerusha monetary law. When the father dies, you're going to give it to this kid. Who said it's his kid? The prophets. You're going to pass in a legal case based on prophecy? Or if the kid hits his father, he'll be chayiv misa. Who said it's his father? Prophets? It doesn't matter. Once we initially established that this is the father based on prophecy, which was an FYI, we're using supernatural data to say, we happen to know that's his father. So then it becomes established. And once it's established forever. That's the take of the Chaste Dovid. It's the take of the Chidah. It seems like the Mishnah Lamelech simply says it about Eliyahu. Same difference, distinction. The Kapois Tmorim was a big guy, and he's really the very loud voice saying it can't be used for anything. And then we have the Raavad who says, forget about using the Metzias, you could use Ruach Hakodesh even to determine how to learn a Blad Gemara, to figure out Halacha in its source. So, coming back, we're going to wrap this up. So coming back, so Rabbi Yosef Engel said, how is Avraham allowed to use Ruach HaKodesh to Pasken? That since Yishmael has not going to have any future generations, so that's it. So he used Ruach HaKodesh to Pasken. So Rabbi Yosef Engel wanted to know how he was allowed to do that, whereas by Yeshaya and Chizkiah, Yeshaya tell Chizkiah, you can't use Ruach HaKodesh not to have children. That's God's business. So Yosef Engel gave two differences. One was, well, if you're only keeping Torah based on Midas Chassidus, you're allowed to take Ruach HaKodesh into account. His second answer was, it's specifically here you're allowed to take Ruach HaKodesh, because the whole issue of transferring the ownership, because maybe the back will one day have good Einiklach. It's all about, you don't know what it's going to be. So if you happen to know what it's going to be, it's okay. That's what he says. But the truth is you can give an answer that Avraham, when he used his Ruach HaKodesh, was just to figure out facts. He saw in the future Yishmael wouldn't have any good kids. According to the Chidah, the Chaste Dovid, the Mishnah Lamelech, you want to figure out a Metzias based on Ruach HaKodesh, that can be brought into the world of Halacha. It's just a Metzias, it's a fact. Whereas by Chizkin Yeshaya, even if it's true that his kids are going, even if it's true that, but you still fulfill Pru Revu by having them, you still have to have kids. It doesn't prevent you from having kids. So that is where we're going to stop. Rabbi Yosef Engel has a lot to say about that, but we got a bit sidetracked with all these other opinions. And Bochem, and we will end over.